Welcome to this week's session of Fridays on the Farm. Today we're going to talk about fire ants, which is one of our big problems here in Hot Spring County, especially this time of year. Everybody can recognize these little boogers. They're kind of a reddish brown color. They're anywhere from an eighth to a quarter of an inch long. They have a painful sting because they are incredibly aggressive when they're disturbed. Sometimes disturbing them means you're in their territory. It could be you stepped on one of their mounds by accident, but these are the ones that will get you before you know it and can be a major problem both in the pastures, your hay fields, around your barns, or even around your home. Fire ant mounds can be a big problem, even if we're talking about out in the field where you're trying to cut hay. Those mounds can be a problem for your hay cutter. They can bog things down. It can make your fields rough. If you've got a big enough problem, your cows aren't wanting to graze because they don't want to get around those. And there's lots of different issues it can cause. It can even be a danger. Some people are highly allergic to fire ants besides just the painful irritation. And so getting control of fire ants is really important. Fire ants are a very social insect. Just like most ants, you're always going to see them travel in groups. They have a very high reproductive capacity, and there are very few things that will actually target these ants. There are a few species of phorid flies that are out there. We actually did a demo here in Hot Spring County out at Lake DeGray a couple years ago. Unfortunately, the year we had all of our flies hatched was the year that we had the big flood and everything at DeGray went underwater. So we weren't able to get a lot of results from our particular test. But in other areas, it seems that those phorid flies can become a nuisance and kind of discourage the ants from occupying those areas. Unfortunately, it's hard to get your hands on those flies anymore, which makes there to be even less natural enemies for these red imported fire ants. The queen is your biggest target when we're talking about controlling fire ants. She's going to mate once and live in that ant mound for up to 7 years. And usually there's 3 to 4 queens in every group. Your worker ants are living only 30 to 90 days, but she can produce up to 500 eggs per day. And depending on the size of your fire ants is whether you're looking at a single queen or a multiple queen colony. And then there's the part that we've really got to talk about, especially as we look at hay production, is the fire ant quarantine. This is something that's monitored by USDA. It's implemented here in Arkansas by the State Plant Board, and it's trying to keep fire ants from invading the rest of the country and even the state here in Arkansas. Surprisingly, not everybody has them. They are imported fire ants because they got here. Pretty much everywhere in South Central Arkansas, they're creeping their way farther north. You can see here in Arkansas, they added 4 counties this year to the quarantine area. This means you cannot move hay out of these counties into areas that are not included in the quarantine. Anything that's had contact with the soil, here you see this hay is stored outside. This hay would not need to be transported to any of those counties. That also not only does it include hay, but plants that have roots and soil attached to them. Sod is a big factor in this, baled hay, straw, and anything that's used in soil moving equipment, because we don't want to take any chance of moving those ants along with that soil somewhere that they don't already have that problem. You can see here in hay bales make an ideal habitat for them because this is something that's fairly stationary. There's plenty of room for them to get around. And you can see some of the damage they can cause. Obviously, if you've got cows and they bite into a set of red fire ants, they're not going to be very happy. They're not going to be able to utilize that hay, and you're going to end up wasting it, and it's going to cost you in the long run. So what can you do in your hay storage so that you don't have that problem? One of the things to do is consider treating. If you have to store on the ground, maybe you treat that storage area about a week before you move hay onto the storage site. You can also apply fire ant bait out in your pastures so that maybe you're not bringing those fire ants in from the field to your storage site. Whenever you're treating, I would treat at least 25 feet away from the bales just to help protect them. If you're storing hay on concrete, you can ship out of those quarantine areas because it's less likely you'll be taking ants with you. And any kind of barrier that's like that keeps your hay from sitting on the soil. And if it's periodically treated and surveyed, you can actually get permission to move that hay out of the quarantine area. So if you know you've got fire ants, you're trying to prevent that from being a problem, you've got 2 different options when it comes to chemical control. You've got baits and contact insecticides. And this is really important when we talk about efficacy. I never recommend home remedies. You might have had some luck with some of these, but most of the time, what most people tell me is, oh yeah, that diesel took care of that mound, but then I had 4 more pop up somewhere else. You might not have actually killed your ants, you just made them move out of that and start a new hill somewhere else. Hot water could be effective, but the temperature that water has to be and the amount you have to pour to actually kill the ants on contact, you run a really high risk of burning yourself in the process, and you've really got to think about that risk. There's lots of home remedies out there, and we really do not have research that recommends any of these. Baits is one of the most effective choices you have, especially for treating something like the size of a field or putting around your storage site. You want, and the idea with baits is it has the toxin that's going to kill the ant built in with some kind of attractive material. So for that to work, your ants have got to pick up that bait, take it back into the colony, and get that toxin to the queen so that she either dies or becomes infertile. And that's how the baits actually work in killing the fire ants. One of the places where people go wrong is they put out one of these baits and they go kick all the mounds. Well, if those ants are all stirred up, they're not going out and foraging and bringing that bait back into the colony. And lots of times with fire ants, it's not a one-shot deal. With one treatment, you're looking at about 60% control. In our part of the state, to maintain 90% of the control, you're looking at around 3 treatments per year. So if you really want to get rid of fire ants, don't expect to do it all at once. These are some of the examples that are approved baits for pasture use in particular. So when we look through these, Amdro was one of your options. There's several different versions from Amdro to Amdro Pro, Siege Pro, and Max Force. This is one that's actually going to go after the queen, and you'll start to see results within 2 to 3 weeks from when you put it out. And the Amdro Pro is actually registered for use in pastures. The next one is the Extinguish. This is also going to, instead of killing the queen, it sterilizes the queen. So you really won't see results until about 4 to 8 weeks after you put out this particular bait. It's registered for use in pastures and cropland and even in your gardens. So if you've got a garden as well, this could be an option for you. Just know that you do have that longer period before you're going to see results. Extinguish Plus is also an option. It's used in a lot of the USDA research programs. It contains a toxin and an IGR, which is an insect growth regulator. It'll work to either kill or sterilize the queen, and you'll start to see results within 2 to 3 weeks with this product, and it is registered for pastures as well. Another product is Distance or Esteem. These both work to sterilize the queen. Again, you're looking at results within 4 to 8 weeks, and it is registered for pastures just like the others. And the biggest thing with baits is realizing how long it's actually going to take to see those results. Don't go put Amdro out and expect to see all the ants gone the next day, because that's not how baits work. They have to have time to get that toxin back into the colony and to the queen and let it do its job. When it comes to putting out application of bait, it is more effective than treating the mounds because you're actually getting it everywhere. Those forages are going out. Those ants are going out and foraging and actually bringing that toxin back into the hive. You're normally putting out less pesticide to the environment than if you were actually trying to treat every mound with an insecticide. And you're not having to walk around and make sure you get every single mound. So you're saving a lot of time as well. So this is always our recommendation for treating pastures, is to look more at a bait application than an individual mound treatment. Some places that people go wrong is you've got to use this product like a bait when those ants are active. The only way it works is by getting the forage back into the colony, so those ants have to be out hunting for it. If you put this out right before rain, it's probably going to get washed away and it's not going to find its way back into the colony. It's important that we store it correctly, and you also don't want to put out too much. Those labels are written for a reason, and we always recommend following label recommendations. Don't try to water it in. Let it sit there, let those ants find it and forage like they would anything else. And absolutely don't go kick over all the mounds, because then those ants are in fight mode rather than forage mode, and you don't want to slow that down of letting the product be as effective as possible. If you want more information on fire ants, we've got a really good handout that talks about how to control it in 2 easy steps. We also have our MP 144 that has all of our recommended products for fire ants, both for our home lawns and our pastures and hay fields. And as always, if you've got more questions, don't ever hesitate to give us a call. Thank you for joining us for this week's session of Fridays on the Farm. Next week, we're going to change topics a little bit and talk about minerals in cattle. We'll see you next Friday.